Good evening, folks, and welcome to another exciting edition of the GBI Show. We have this gridiron betting insights. I'm Jay SANIN, and tonight we got another big show in store for you. We are going to be previewing the NFC North tonight. We're going to take it bet by bet. We're going to look at the key storylines for each team in the division, as well as their odds to win the division, conference, Super Bowl. We'll let you know what we like in the futures market. And of course, it's a Thursday, and that means we are going to play a game of Trust Me, Don't Trust Me tonight. Of course, the Gridiron Betting Insight Show brought to you by BetQL. Use betql.co for all your NFL betting data. Find out who the sharps are on, find out who the public's on, how the lines are moving, and everything else you need to know before you place your bets on the gridiron this year. Sign up there now. Use promo code SANIN, that's SANIN, for 20% off of all subscriptions at betql.co. Welcome in once again to the GBI Show, the only show about sports betting where we try to be as funny as Tom Brenneman calling a home run hit into a place called the judgment-free zone while he apologizes for saying something incredibly problematic on television. Of course, we fail at being that funny, but we try here on the GBI Show. Tonight, again, the NFC North, and let's get right into it. Let's get into the key storylines for the 2020 season. We will start with the defending champions of the NFC North, that being the Green Bay Packers. And the big thing for the Packers this year is their hope to improve offensively under second-year head coach Matt LaFleur. Now, LaFleur, he was supposed to be an offensive genius. That didn't really come to fruition last year. That team really pitched its tent defensively. But of course, they won 13 games, so how much can you really complain if you're the Packers? They had the number 4 scoring defense in the NFC last season. They'll look to build upon that. Of course, they had some great contributions. Jair Alexander, the young player in the defensive backfield. We'll see if he can do that again. We'll see if the Packers can continue their success on the defensive side of the ball, while Aaron Rodgers and LaFleur look to reclaim the magic of maybe Peter LaFleur instead of Matt LaFleur on the offensive side of the ball and run through the NFC and run all the way to the Super Bowl this year. Aaron Rodgers, by the way, he struggled a little bit last season. Obviously, the coaching changes, the lack of continuity on that side of the ball may have hurt him a little bit. But Aaron Rodgers, average quarterback last year, 17th in the league in yards per pass attempt. And that probably won't get it done in a division that has a lot of tough defenses. And, I mean, even at the bottom of the division, some defenses might be up and coming this year in Green Bay. So we'll see if they can patch that up. Now, we go to the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, they made the playoffs at 10-6, had that shocking overtime win against the New Orleans Saints, where was it offensive pass interference on Kyle Rudolph at the end? Was it not pass interference? I don't know. All I know is I'm really happy that they did not review it and that Saints fans got to be upset again that their season ended on a controversial call after all the complaining they did against the Rams 2 seasons ago in the playoffs. And the big story for the Vikings heading into the season is, all right, you've been to the playoffs a whole bunch. You've been pretty deep into the playoffs. You've been in the divisional round last year. You made it to the NFC Championship game not too long ago where you got your doors blown off by the Philadelphia Eagles. Can you cash it in this time and get to a Super Bowl? And if they're going to do that, of course, it starts and ends with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, his struggles against teams above 500, well documented. Can he turn that around? And how is he going to respond to the loss of Stephon Diggs in his receiving core? Of course, he should have a healthy Adam Thielen, which he did not last year. That should help things. But you wonder, one less weapon in that offense for the Vikings. They were 10-6 last season. Can they improve? And can they improve on their playoff performances is going to be the key question for them in 2020. A team that might look to break into the playoffs this year, that'd be the Chicago Bears. And the Chicago Bears have the classic conundrum at the quarterback position where, as the cliche goes, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you might not have one. And right now, they have to decide, is Mitchell Trubisky or is Nick Foles going to be the man in Chicago to lead them forward? Of course, Nick Foles, he was injured last year in Jacksonville, which gave rise to Gardner Minshew and his majestic mustache down in Duval County. Is it going to be Foles, or will they stick with Mitchell Trubisky to lead that offense? Now, the Chicago Bears, they might have had the worst offense in the NFL last season. They managed to win 8 games, but on a per-play basis, the Chicago Bears worse than every team except for the New York Jets last season. They averaged 4.7 yards per play. And in that division, where every team can sling it a little bit with Cousins, Rodgers, even Matt Stafford in Detroit, 4.7 yards per play, not going to get it done. They're going to have to do better, but first they'll have to decide who their quarterback is. And of course, in this COVID-19 world that we're living in, you don't have a preseason to figure it out. So good luck to Matt Nagy and the Chicago Bears making that decision. And finally, the Detroit Lions. And, well, there will be no fans in the seats in Detroit this year, but that doesn't mean there won't be a whole lot of hot seats at Ford Field this season, starting, of course, with head coach Matt Patricia. He's a part of that legendary Bill Belichick coaching tree, was the defensive coordinator for a very successful Patriots team. He comes to Detroit. The defense really not looking so great. The offense not getting the job done either. They lost their last 9 games last season. And, of course, you had an injury to Matt Stafford. He only played half the year. But is him being back going to be enough not only to save Patricia's job, but potentially to save Matt Stafford's job in Detroit? Because he could be gone at the end of this year if things don't go well. So a lot of interesting things to look at for all 4 of these teams. All 4 of these teams have been to the playoffs in recent years in the NFL, even Detroit. Detroit didn't win anything when they went, but all 4 of these teams have shown the potential to make the playoffs. And of course, with Detroit, you draft Jeff Okudah in the top 3. Will that translate to any improvement on the defensive end as well? And again, we talk about all these quarterbacks in this division, how skilled it is at that position. Drafting defensive backfield, smart move. We'll see if it pays off. Now, again, COVID-19 brings us to a whole different world in the NFL. So every time we do this show, we preview these divisions, we're going to take a look at the opt-outs, the players that are going to miss this season because of COVID-19, whether they're high risk or they just decided for their own safety, you know what, we're just going to wait until next year. And each of these teams, interestingly enough, really has one key player opting out. And I think it's interesting because you have 2 of them on the offensive side of the ball, 2 of them on the defensive side of the ball, which could create some problems for all 4 of these rosters. For the Packers, you start out on the offensive side of the ball. Devin Funchess at wide receiver opting out. Of course, he had a ton of success in Carolina. He made Cam Newton look competent before his career went down the toilet. We'll see if he can resurrect it in New England. But Funchess was supposed to be a weapon that was really supposed to help Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, Devontae Adams, his number 1 target. Randall Cobb now gone to Dallas. Can the Packers get over now the loss of Funchess before they really even had a chance to integrate him in? It'll be interesting to see. Obviously, if you're Aaron Rodgers, you think, man, I can't catch a break with these wide receivers. I've been relying so heavily on Devontae Adams, and now Funchess obviously not there to help pick things up for an offense that, again, is looking to improve this year when they were the weak link, surprisingly enough, in 2019. Also on the offensive side of the ball, you look at the Detroit Lions, Geronimo Allison, the former Green Bay Packer, he goes there to play wide receiver alongside Matt Stafford, and you think, wow, you have Golladay, you have Geronimo Allison, you might have something there in that receiving core. Unfortunately, he will not be playing this season either. And again, in a year where there is a lot on the line for a lot of players and a lot of coaches on that roster, not having him could hurt pretty badly for the Detroit Lions. Now we move to the defensive side of the ball, and this is where I think things get interesting, and we'll start with the Minnesota Vikings. They lose defensive tackle Michael Pierce, just signed a 3-year, $27 million deal to play for the Vikings, and it's not so much the loss of Pierce that hurts the Vikings, so much as the loss of Pierce when he was supposed to be the replacement for Linval Joseph on the interior of that defensive line. So now you lose Joseph and his replacement, and all of a sudden you don't have an answer at that position where the Vikings have traditionally been very strong. Will they be able to stop the run the same way as they have in years past? That remains to be seen, but not a good start when your answer to one of the best defensive tackles in the game of football Not even going to suit up this season. And then, of course, for the Chicago Bears, not as big a loss. Defensive tackle Eddie Goldman. I mean, that defensive line should be fine. At least, I mean, they're always going to get after the quarterback with Khalil Mack in the equation. But you don't see that one hurting as much as the Vikings losing Pierce. But at the same time, again, anytime you're losing defensive line depth in a division where, we talk about the quarterbacks, but you have Aaron Jones and now A.J. Dillon in that Packers backfield. You have Dalvin Cook in the backfield, should be healthy, at least in theory, for the Vikings this season. And all of a sudden, if you're Chicago, you're a little bit thinner up front. Are you going to be able to stop those guys in the running game? We'll see. Now, let's take a look at the futures odds for all four of these teams. We'll start with the odds to win the NFC North. We'll start with the favorite to win the division, that being the Minnesota Vikings. They come in at plus 160 to win the North. Green Bay right behind them at plus 180. And that's an interesting line to me. We might revisit it later in the show, in fact. Spoiler alert. But the Packers, they were a 13-win team last year. And to see them as behind Minnesota in terms of the odds to win the NFC North, that is a little bit surprising to me, especially now that you do have a little bit of continuity in the coaching staff for Green Bay, something you didn't have last year. And my goodness, looking back, how impressive was that for the Packers to win 13 games without any continuity at head coach with a new staff in place? So, I mean, the fact that they could be even better this year, I just thought it's interesting to see Minnesota slightly ahead of them in the race for that NFC North. Again, especially with Stephon Diggs not being in the equation anymore for the Vikings. Right behind them, a little bit more distant, I guess I should say, is Chicago at plus 380, Detroit way back there at plus 550. And, we seem to have a Lions fan who's confident in the Lions this year, wants us to think that they're going to go 16-0. I don't know about that. BOFA boys. Either way, we'll look ahead at the odds to win the NFC as a whole. And again, Minnesota slightly ahead of Green Bay in this category, plus 1,200 for the Vikings, Green Bay at plus 1,300. Either way, very nice payout if you back one of those teams and they happen to come home for you. Chicago further back at 20-1, and Detroit, who, I guess you can't rule out a 16-0 season. I think they're probably closer to going 0-16. But either way, they're back at 30-1 to win the NFC. And then finally, to win the Super Bowl out of the NFC North, Minnesota at 25-1, Green Bay 28-1, Chicago all the way back at 40-1, and Detroit, they're way back there at 66-1. Of course, that's where the Raiders, that's where the Denver Broncos were when we previewed the AFC West. Now, looking at week one in this division, and it's pretty interesting in that you have division matchups for all four teams in the division right off the bat. I don't necessarily like when they do this in the NFL. College has a non-conference season where Alabama gets to beat the Citadel by 900 points to start the season. I think the NFL should not put division games in week one, especially in a season with no preseason. These games carry so much weight, these 6 games in the division. And now with no warm-up period whatsoever, you're telling these teams, okay, this is going to go a long way to deciding who makes the playoffs. Good luck. I don't necessarily like that. Now, looking at the week one lines, you have the Packers plus 3 at Minnesota. And as they say in the NFL, home field's worth 3 points is the conventional wisdom. So basically you're saying these teams are extremely even heading into that week one matchup. Now, what's interesting to me about that is you're saying, okay, these teams on neutral field about even, and yet the Vikings are favored in the division. You're not looking at them with the same odds to win the division and the conference and the Super Bowl. So, to me, that says there's a little bit of value on Green Bay in the futures market. As far as this game, I think that you have issues in the receiving core for both teams, but Kirk Cousins going against a winning team is always going to be a little bit concerning. Granted, you have the home field advantage in Minnesota, But how much is that going to be a factor? What's the attendance situation going to be like in the state of Minnesota? We don't know that for sure yet. I feel like it'd be nice to know with 3 weeks left until the season, 3 weeks to the day. By the way, September 10th is the start of the season. We are 3 weeks away, and we don't know. So I don't know if that 3-point spread is good. I mean, I would look toward the dog in that one, at least initially. Maybe wait and see if you can get it at 3.5. Stay away if it goes under the field goal. But an interesting number to start the season for these two teams who both look to be playoff contenders in the NFC North. And then you have kind of the undercard in the division where you have Chicago, 1.5-point dogs at Detroit. And again, we don't even know what the quarterback situation is like right now in Chicago. So I'm interested to see how that goes as we get a little closer. Probably can't justify a decision one way or the other until we know, is it going to be Foles for sure? Is it going to be Trubisky for sure? Until then, not super interested in making a lean one way or the other. Now, you can find those lines and lines for all the week 1 games in the NFL at betql.co. And in addition to those lines, you can find their projections, which identify where there might be some wiggle room between the spreads and what they are projecting, which of course can help you find value, help you make smarter bets this NFL season. Go to betql.co, use promo code SANIN, SANIN, right there on the bottom of your screen, so I don't have to keep spelling it out for you. And you can save 20% off of any subscription. You want to use it for a week, you want to use it for a year, something in between, be my guest. BetQL.co, promo code SANIN, 20% off any of those subscriptions. Get better data before you place your NFL bets this season, including bets on the NFC North. We have a check-in here. Chargers to the Super Bowl, change my mind. I don't know that I necessarily disagree with that. The quarterback position throws me off a little bit. In the AFC West preview, I had the Chargers at 8-1 as my pick to win the division. So I don't hate them making a run, but I just think once you get towards the elite teams, you're going to have some problems with either Tyrod Taylor or, if he gets ready in time, Justin Herbert. Either way, I do think it's an interesting look at long odds for them to win the division. Now, we'll move on to a Thursday staple here on the GBI Show. And I say a Thursday staple, this is the second show. So not much of a staple yet, or at least not a lot of pages being stapled, but it is a Thursday staple. We're going to play Trust Me, Don't Trust Me, where I tell you whether or not you can trust certain players, key players in each division. As we get into the season, it's not going to go division by division. We will break out key players across the league. But for right now, during our NFC North Preview show, we're going to look strictly at this division and some of the key players that you can either trust or not trust. I'll tell you right now, trust me, don't trust me. We'll start with the quarterback position because the NFC North is full of talented quarterbacks, but quarterbacks where you don't really know what you have. And so let me clarify a little bit for you. We'll start out with Kirk Cousins, and I do trust him, which is rare for me. I have trust issues, as you learned last Thursday. But I do trust Kirk Cousins because he's at least going to be reliable. You know what you're getting with him. You're getting a guy who's going to struggle against some of the best teams in the league, but a guy who at home and against lesser competition will absolutely knock it out of the park. And when you're looking to make the playoffs, get into the dance before you can think about making a Super Bowl run, a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, he will help you do that. He was one of only 8 quarterbacks last season to average 8 yards or more per pass attempt. Of course, you do have the question mark with Stephon Diggs. Will he be able to overcome that? It remains to be seen. But for now, I do trust Kirk Cousins, and he could very well make me regret that decision. He's no Dante Culpepper after all. Now, elsewhere at the quarterback position, we'll look at Matt Stafford. I don't trust Matt Stafford heading into this season. His numbers, always very pretty. Last season, second in the league in yards per pass attempt, averaged 8.6 yards per attempt last season. Very impressive. Of course, he had a season, and during that half a season, he threw 1 yard short of 2,500 yards in 8 games. So he was right there, pacing for 5,000 yards The problem with Stafford is you take Kirk Cousins' issues against winning teams and you multiply them by, I mean, a billion, and that's what you have with Matthew Stafford. He's 25 and 30 lifetime against NFC North teams. That's not going to get the job done during this period of time where the division is extremely strong. And I don't think he can overcome it outside of the division because you're playing both South divisions in their entirety as NFC North teams this year. It means you're going to play the Bucks, you're going to play the Saints, you're going to play a lot of teams that could make a run to the Super Bowl outside of your own division. And then, oh, by the way, you get to play the Packers, who were 13-3 last year. You get to play a Vikings team that had 10 wins last year. I just don't see it this season for Stafford. And I think it ends with him leaving Detroit after this year, if I'm being honest. Now, we'll go to the quarterback situation in Chicago because we have two quarterbacks to discuss here. We have Mitchell Trubisky and you have Nick Foles. And guess what? I don't trust either of them. Mitchell Trubisky, 32nd in the league last year in yards per pass attempt. He averaged 6.1 yards per attempt. You know who finished a tenth of a yard better? Mason Rudolph last year. And Mason Rudolph was abysmal, which speaks to Trubisky's overall skill set, I think, at this point. He had that one good year when Nagy and the defense were humming. He's lost it last year, and he gets a lot of credit for his mobility, but he has 7 rushing touchdowns on his career. It's not as if he's Michael Vick out there or a less problematic mobile quarterback, we'll go with Lamar Jackson. Either way, he's not one of those guys for all the credit that he gets for scrambling once in a while. Trubisky, he couldn't handle televisions being on at the team facility because he was worried about criticism from the Chicago media and the national media. What's he going to do with another quarterback breathing down his neck? He might not survive the season. We'll see. I don't trust him for now. Moving on to Foles, I don't trust him either. Again, you're coming back from an injury-riddled season, and even without that, he's a guy he's had one good year in his whole career, and that was back in 2013, where he had that amazing 27 touchdown, 2 interception season with the Eagles. And yes, he went on a very nice Super Bowl run, replacing Carson Wentz a few years back. But I need to see more than that from a quarterback to think that he can take them through a season as anything else but a fill-in. So I don't trust either quarterback there in Chicago. I don't trust Matt Stafford. I do, again, Cousins I do, and Aaron Rodgers, I did not include him in this segment because it is given that I trust Aaron Rodgers, even if he did have a little bit of a down year last season. I think he'll pick it back up this year as the coaching staff gets its feet under it around him. Now, elsewhere, and trust me, don't trust me, we're going to look at a couple of skill position guys in the NFC North. We'll look first at Adam Thielen. And Adam Thielen, I do trust, even though things might be a little more difficult for him this year than they've been in the past. Now, last season, he was hurt. He did not play the full season. He only had 30 catches in the regular season. Had a nice postseason. I think it was 179 receiving yards in 2 games, the bulk of which came in the win against the Saints. I think he had 50 yards in the loss to San Francisco, but everybody looked bad against the San Francisco defense during the postseason last year, except for Patrick Mahomes, who was an actual sorcerer. So I don't blame Thielen there, not to mention he was bouncing back from an injury. But the 2 years before that, averaged 148 targets per season in those 2 years. Of course, he had Stephon Diggs in the equation. This year he does not, which I think will result in a similar, if not increased load for his targets. I think he'll play very well. He's excellent at creating separation, whereas some receivers, they need to go deep. They need to use their speed. Thielen, he's more of an all-around receiver as far as I'm concerned. He's able to work the short portion of the field, which to me translates very well regardless of who else is in the receiving core around him. So I trust Adam Thielen this year. I think he's going to have a very nice season. And then Aaron Jones, the running back for the Green Bay Packers. Interesting situation for Aaron Jones because he led the league in touchdowns last year on the ground. He was tied with Derrick Henry. He had 16 touchdowns on the ground. Well, how do they thank him? They bring in A.J. Dillon, the rookie running back out of Boston College, who you may have seen has legs that are actual tree trunks. He could win a world's strongest man competition with those legs. Unbelievable. He is a physical specimen. And of course, he was one of the only things making Boston college football respectable, which is an even more impressive accomplishment than having a nice set of legs for those of you scoring at home. But Jones, he's in a contract year this year, so I think he overcomes the fact that some of his workload will be compromised by Dillon in the running game. I still think he's going to get into the end zone a bunch. I think he's going to make it so that a team is going to pay him, although it doesn't look like it'll be Green Bay in the future. Now, we have gone through and determined who we trust and who we don't trust in the NFC North. And we have a Bills fan checking in by the name of Randy Bobandy. Going to go out on a limb and assume that's not his last name. But he says the Bills are better than all them scrubs in the NFC North. And I'll agree with you up until we get to the Packers. Because when you get to the playoffs, who would you rather have throwing the football, Aaron Rodgers or Josh Allen? I do like the Bills this year. I think they're going to have a great season. But there is no way that the Bills are better than the Green Bay Packers unless they somehow manage to get Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers to either switch bodies or just trade for one another. Either way, that's the only way that the Bills will be better than the Green Bay Packers. Appreciate you checking in, Randy Bobandy, and everybody's checked in tonight. Of course, if you watch the show live, you can do that. You can send me your questions, your comments, or just tell me that I look like a toad person, because you wouldn't be wrong. Either way, appreciate you checking in, everybody who has so far this evening. Now, let's take a look at the futures market. We'll wrap up the show with some futures bets in the NFC North, and we'll start with the Green Bay Packers. I like a few here for Green Bay. We'll start with them to win the division at plus 180. These odds coming from DraftKings Sportsbook earlier today. And again, if you're telling me that the Vikings and the Packers are even on a neutral field with that 3-point opening week line, you're telling me there's a little bit of value there on the Packers with better odds than the Vikings to win the division. I'll also take Green Bay to win the NFC at 13-1. You have a select group of teams, maybe 3 or 4 teams that have a real shot at winning the NFC this season. I like Seattle. I like Green Bay. You have New Orleans, and then like maybe the Cowboys. You might be able to convince me of Dallas, but it's unlikely. So really 3 teams, and then, the Cowboys can be like a half a team. 3.5 teams, I think, have a real shot at winning the NFC this year. And one of them happens to be Green Bay. If you get them at 13-1, I think that's a great look, especially with Aaron Rodgers. He can't possibly perform worse than he did last year. That's just my opinion. If you don't want those longer odds, you can look at the Packers to just make the playoffs. A little juiced at minus 129, but even if they don't win the division, as plus 180 underdogs, so to speak, with the Vikings there just $20 cheaper on that line, they should be able to sneak a wild card spot, especially if you're expanding the playoffs by 1 team this year. Something to remember when you're making those to make the playoffs bets. I think that the Packers should easily slide in as, at worst, a wild card in the NFC North, though I do like them to win the division. Going over to the Vikings, there are a couple of bets that have my attention here. I don't like them to win the division at plus 160 when you can get a better price with the Packers, but I do like them going over 8.5 wins at minus 150. A little heavy on the juice there again, but if you're willing to drink it, you have a team that came off a 10-win season and is one of the better squads in the NFC. And I also like them to make the playoffs at minus 136. Because again, with that extra playoff spot, say they go 8-8, you still do have a shot at the playoffs, even though I think they go well above that. I do think they end up in the double digits as far as wins are concerned this season. Finally, in the futures market, the Detroit Lions, while the BOFA boys think they're going to go 16-0 this season, I'm going the other way. I think they are going to win under 6.5 games, plus 118 the odds. So you got plus money on a team that only won, 3 games last season? I don't think they're going to win 7 games. And again, the schedule is a big reason why. You play 4 games against double-digit win teams from last year in the Packers and Vikings. Even if you split those, you got to deal with the NFC South and the AFC South. You're dealing with the Phillip Rivers Colts. You're dealing with the Texans. You're dealing with the Titans, the runners-up in the AFC. You're dealing with a heavily hyped Tampa Bay team, New Orleans, Carolina with a new quarterback, and, of course, the Atlanta Falcons, who, while they don't win a lot of games, they never make it easy on you. I just don't think there are enough wins in that schedule for the Detroit Lions to get to 7 or above. We'll see what happens, of course, in the NFC North. 3 more weeks, folks, until football. And, of course, we'll be back on Tuesday with an all-new edition of the GBI Show, where we will stay in the North, but this time it'll be the AFC North. Number 1 overall pick Joe Burrow is in the mix. And, of course, Ben Roethlisberger is back. Can the Ravens repeat an amazing season last year? They finished the regular season with 12 straight wins, choked in the playoffs. Can they do better in the postseason next time around if they get there? And can the Cleveland Browns finally live up to the hype? We will figure it all out, and we will go through it bet by bet on Tuesday in our AFC North preview on Gridiron Betting Insights, the GBI Show. Until then, this is Jay SANIN signing off. Good luck on all your bets until then.